The Galactic Council had existed for 9 million years. Its members had watched stars die and be born again. They had mapped the edges of the universe and 3 billion species across 1 trillion worlds. They had seen empires rise and fall like waves on an endless ocean. Nothing surprised them anymore. Nothing could. Then the humans arrived. The first contact happened on a small moon at the edge of the Orion Arm. A research vessel from the collective detected strange radio signals coming from a yellow star system. The signals were crude and chaotic, full of noise and overlapping transmissions. Music mixed with mathematics. Declarations of war played alongside love songs. The researchers listened for 3 days and could not make sense of any of it. They sent a probe to investigate. What they found confused them even more. The third planet from the yellow star was a mess. Its atmosphere was changing. Its oceans were full of waste. Its dominant species had built weapons capable of destroying their entire world many times over, yet they had not destroyed themselves. They fought constantly but somehow kept surviving. They polluted their only home but kept trying to clean it. They were a contradiction wrapped in flesh and bone. They sent their report to the Council. The Council reviewed it and decided to observe. This species would either destroy itself soon or evolve beyond its violent nature. Either way, it was not a concern. Young species rarely survived their first 10,000 years. The universe was patient. It could wait. But the humans did not follow the pattern. Within 200 years of their first radio transmission, they had left their planet. Within another 100, they had reached the edges of their solar system. Within 50 more, they had built their first faster-than-light engine using technology they had stolen, borrowed, and invented all at once. No species in galactic history had moved so fast. The Council began to pay attention. Ambassador was chosen to make formal contact. He was old even by standards, having served the Council for 6,000 years. He had welcomed 17 species into the galactic community. He had also watched 12 species fail the evaluation and be quarantined for their own safety. He approached the human delegation expecting something familiar. What he found was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The humans sent 5 representatives. They were small by galactic standards, with soft skin and fragile bones. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no venom, no telepathy. Their senses were dull compared to most species. They could not see in the dark or hear ultrasonic frequencies or smell danger from a distance. By every measure that mattered, they should have been prey animals on their own world. But they were not. The lead representative was a woman named Sarah. She was 63 years old, which meant she had already lived most of her natural. This fact alone disturbed. His own species lived for 12,000 years. The idea of building a civilization with such short lives seemed impossible. How could anyone accomplish anything meaningful in just a few decades? Smiled when she met him. It was a strange expression, baring teeth in a way that most species used as a threat display. But her eyes were warm and her voice was calm. "Ambassador," she said, speaking his name with perfect pronunciation despite having learned his language only 2 weeks before. "Thank you for welcoming us. We have traveled a long way to meet you." Studied her carefully. Her heart was beating fast, which suggested fear or excitement, but her body showed no signs of either. She stood straight and still, meeting his gaze without hesitation. Behind her, the other 4 humans waited with similar composure. They were afraid, he realized. They had to be. They were standing before a representative of an empire that spanned 1,000,000 worlds, but they had learned to hide their fear so well that even he could barely detect it. That was the first thing about humans that made uneasy. The evaluation process took 3 standard months. The Council reviewed human history, technology, culture, and biology. They analyzed their wars and their art, their science and their religion, their cruelty and their kindness. The data painted a picture that no one on the Council could quite understand. Humans had spent most of their history killing each other. They had invented weapons of terrible power and used them on their own kind. They had enslaved members of their own species, committed genocides, and caused extinctions. By any reasonable standard, they should have been classified as too dangerous for galactic contact. But the data also showed something else. Every time humans fell, they got back up. Every war ended with someone trying to build peace. Every atrocity was eventually remembered and mourned. They learned from their mistakes, slowly and painfully, but they learned. Other species often stagnated or collapsed when faced with great challenges. Humans adapted. They changed. They refused to give up even when giving up made sense. The council member from the Quiet Collective, a species of telepaths who had not spoken aloud in 50,000 years, broke their silence for the first time in 3 centuries to offer an observation. They are not dangerous because they are violent, the collective said through a single chosen speaker. They are dangerous because they believe they can become better. That belief is more powerful than any weapon. The vote was close. 47 members voted to welcome humanity into the galactic community. 44 voted for quarantine. The remaining 9 abstained, unable to decide. For the first time in 200,000 years, a species had divided the council almost perfectly in half. Humanity was granted provisional membership. They would be watched carefully. Any sign of aggression toward other species would result in immediate quarantine. Any attempt to expand beyond their designated borders would be met with force. Ambassador delivered the news to Sarah personally. She listened to all the conditions, all the restrictions, all the warnings. When he was finished, she smiled that strange human smile again. "We understand," she said. "We have a saying on Earth. Rome was not built in a day. We are patient people, Ambassador. We can wait." Did not know what Rome was, but he understood the meaning. Humans thought in terms of generations, not individual lifetimes. They planted trees whose shade they would never sit under. They started projects that their great would finish. It was a kind of immortality that his own long-lived species had never developed. As he watched the human delegation leave, felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He was not sure if it was hope or fear. Perhaps it was both. 20 years passed. In galactic terms, this was less than the blink of an eye. Empires measured time in. Wars lasted for centuries. Treaties took decades to negotiate. 20 years was nothing. For humans, 20 years was a generation. The changes they made in that time were small at first. They established trading posts on the edges of their territory. They sent scholars to study at galactic universities. They hired themselves out as workers, translators, and consultants. They were polite and cooperative and never broke any rules. But they watched everything. Noticed it first. Wherever humans went, they asked questions. They wanted to know how things worked, why decisions were made, who held power and who did not. They took notes. They made friends. They remembered everything. Other species found them amusing at first. These small, short-lived creatures with their endless curiosity were entertaining. They made good servants and mediocre soldiers. They had no special abilities worth mentioning. Some council members joked that accepting humanity had been the easiest decision in history. They posed no threat at all. Then they invaded. They were not members of the Galactic Council. They came from beyond the mapped regions, from a place where no probe had ever returned. They were massive creatures, 3 times the size of the largest council species, with armored shells that could withstand plasma fire and claws that could tear through starship hulls. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed. The first attack hit the Methane Collective, a peaceful species of gas dwellers who had never developed weapons. The fleet appeared without warning, descended on 3 colony worlds, and stripped them of all life in less than a day. 4 billion beings died before anyone could respond. The Council mobilized its defense forces. Ships from a dozen species gathered at the border, forming the largest fleet in recent memory. Military experts analyzed the technology and tactics. Diplomats attempted to establish communication. Nothing worked. They were faster, stronger, and more numerous than anyone had expected. Their weapons cut through Council shields like water through paper. Their ships could not be tracked or predicted. Every battle was a massacre. Within 6 months, the Council had lost 200 worlds and showed no signs of slowing the invasion. Fear spread through the galaxy. Species that had been at peace began preparing for extinction. Some fled toward the galactic core, hopping to hide. Others built bunkers deep underground, praying they would pass them by. And then humanity did something that no one expected. They volunteered. Sarah, now 83 years old and walking with a cane, stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council. Behind her stood representatives from Earth's unified government, wearing simple gray uniforms without decoration. "We know we are young," said, her voice still strong despite her age. "We know we are small. We know you do not think much of us yet, but we have been watching, we have been learning, and we believe we can help." The council laughed, not cruelly but with genuine disbelief. What could humans possibly offer? Their military was tiny. Their technology was decades behind the most advanced species. They had no experience fighting an enemy like the... Waited for the laughter to fade, then she spoke again. "They are strong, we are weak, but we have fought strong enemies before. On our world the powerful do not always win. The clever do. The determined do. The ones who refuse to surrender, even when surrender is the only logical choice. We have spent our entire history learning how to defeat enemies who should have crushed us. Let us show you what we have learned." Was one of the few who did not laugh. He remembered Smile 20 years ago. He remembered the fear she had hidden so well. He understood now that it had not been fear of him. It had been fear of what humanity might become if given the chance. The council voted to accept humanity's offer. They had nothing to lose. The war was already lost by every conventional measure. If the humans wanted to throw themselves into the fire, the council would let them. They expected sacrifice. They expected failure. They expected to watch another species die bravely but uselessly against an unstoppable enemy. They did not expect what happened next. The human fleet arrived at the front lines 3 weeks later. It was a small force by galactic standards, barely 2,000 ships. The council observers assigned to monitor the battle gave humanity a survival estimate of 6 hours. The battle lasted 4 days, and when it ended, the fleet had been destroyed. Not defeated, not driven back, destroyed. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. Nothing remained but debris and silence. The galaxy watched in stunned disbelief as the recordings were analyzed. What the humans had done should not have been possible. Their ships were slower, weaker, and fewer in number. By every calculation, they should have been overwhelmed in the first hour. But humans did not fight the way other species fought. They did not form neat lines or follow predictable patterns. They scattered and regrouped, attacked and retreated, appeared and vanished like ghosts. They turned their own ships into weapons, ramming vessels and detonating their engines at point-blank range. They used asteroids as shields and moons as ambush points. They hacked into communication systems and fed them false information. And they never, not once, considered surrender. Watched the final recording with growing understanding. A human captain, her ship crippled and her crew dying, had steered directly into the command vessel. Her last transmission was a single sentence, spoken calmly despite the fire consuming her bridge. "Tell my daughter I kept my promise." She had not been afraid to die. She had not hesitated or wavered. She had simply done what needed to be done, because that was what humans did. They broke themselves against impossible odds and somehow made the impossible bend. The invasion ended not because humanity defeated them in that single battle, but because they had never encountered prey that fought back so viciously. Their entire strategy depended on fear. When they found a species that would not feel fear, or at least would not let fear stop them, their strategy collapsed. The remaining forces retreated beyond the mapped regions and were never seen again. Humanity had saved the galaxy, and the galaxy did not know what to do with that information. The emergency session reconvened 1 month after the battle. The chamber was silent as Sarah walked to the speaking platform for the last time. She was dying, new. Human medicine had extended her life as far as it could go. She had perhaps weeks left. But she stood straight, and her voice did not waver. "We did not fight for gratitude," she said. "We did not fight for territory or power or recognition. We fought because it was the right thing to do, because someone had to, because that is who we are." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every council member who had laughed at her offer just months before. "We are not strong, we are not wise. We do not live long enough to learn patience, so we learned stubbornness instead. We break, but we do not stay broken. We fall, but we get back up. We lose, but we keep fighting until losing is no longer possible. That is the human way. That is what we offer the galaxy. Not power, not technology, just the simple, stupid refusal to ever give up." She paused and for a moment saw the young woman she had been 20 years ago, standing before him with hidden fear and visible hope. "We want to be your partners," continued. "We want to learn from you and teach you in return. We want to help you become the galaxy you could be, not the galaxy you have settled for being. We are small and young and foolish, but we are also brave and stubborn and kind. Give us a chance. Let us show you what we can become together." The vote that followed was unanimous. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council. All restrictions were lifted. All borders were opened. For the first time in 9 million years, a species had earned its place not through power or age or technology, but through simple, raw courage. Found after the session, sitting alone in a quiet garden overlooking the capital city, she looked tired but peaceful. "You knew," he said, sitting beside her. "When you first came here, you knew it would come to this." Smiled that strange human smile. "No, we hoped. That is different from knowing. We are very good at hopping, Ambassador. It is our greatest strength." "You could have waited. Let others fight preserved your people." "We could have," she agreed. "But then we would not have been human anymore. We are who we are because we choose to stand up, not because it is safe or smart, but because it is right. The moment we stop making that choice, we become something less than ourselves." Was silent for a long time. He had lived for 6,000 years. He had seen wonders beyond description and horrors beyond imagination, but he had never met a species like humanity. They were impossible. They should not exist. By every rule of evolution and survival, they should have destroyed themselves long ago. But they had not. They had reached for the stars instead. And now, against all odds, they were changing the galaxy simply by being themselves. "What will you do now?" he asked finally. Looked up at the alien sky, filled with unfamiliar stars. "Die, probably," she said calmly. "But that is not important. What matters is what comes after. My daughter will take my place. Her children will take hers. We build for the future, Ambassador. We plant seeds we will never see bloom. That is how we made it this far. That is how we will keep going." She turned to look at him directly, and her eyes held something ancient and fierce despite her failing body. "We are not the end of anything. We are the beginning. And beginnings are always messy and painful and full of uncertainty, but they are also full of hope. That is what humanity brings to your council. Not answers, just hope, and the stubborn belief that tomorrow can be better than today." She died 3 weeks later, surrounded by her family and watched by a galaxy that had learned to respect her. Her funeral was broadcast to 1 trillion worlds. Billions of beings from hundreds of species paused their lives to honor a small, fragile creature who had lived barely a century and changed everything. Attended in person, he stood among the human mourners and watched as they celebrated her life with tears and laughter mixed together. They told stories about her, both grand and small. They remembered her failures as well as her triumphs. They did not pretend she had been perfect. That, he realized, was another human strength. They did not need their heroes to be perfect. They just needed them to be real. After the ceremony, his daughter found him standing alone at the edge of the gathering. She looked like her mother, with the same calm eyes and the same hidden strength. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Your mother was remarkable," replied. "I have lived for 6,000 years, and I have never met anyone like her." The daughter smiled, and it was her mother's smile, passed down through generations like a precious inheritance. She would have said there was nothing special about her. She would have said any human would have done the same. And she would have been right. We are all like this, Ambassador. Every single one of us. That is our secret. We are a species of ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things, not because we are special, but because we believe we can. She looked toward the stars, just as her mother had done. "The galaxy thought you were welcoming a weak species into your community. You were not. You were welcoming a fire that has been burning since our first ancestors looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. We will never stop wondering. We will never stop reaching. We will never stop trying to become more than we are." She turned back too, and her eyes held the same ancient fierceness he had seen in her mother. "You asked us once if we were dangerous. The answer is yes. We are the most dangerous species you have ever encountered. Not because we are violent, though we can be. Not because we are powerful, though we are growing stronger. We are dangerous because we believe. We believe in tomorrow. We believe in each other. We believe that the universe can be better than it is. And belief, Ambassador, is the most dangerous force in existence. It moves mountains. It builds empires. It changes everything it touches." She smiled again, and this time there was nothing hidden in it at all. "Welcome to the human era. Try to keep up." 100 years later, the Galactic Council barely resembled its former self. Human ideas had spread like wildfire through the old structures, burning away tradition and replacing it with something new and alive. Species that had stagnated began innovating again. Wars that had simmered for centuries ended in unexpected peace. The galaxy was changing, faster than it ever had before, and humanity was at the center of all of it. They did not rule. They did not conquer. They simply existed, and their existence was enough to transform everything around them. Other species adopted human ways not because they were forced to, but because human ways worked. Human design principles made technology accessible to everyone. Human diplomatic methods resolved conflicts that had seemed permanent. Human art and music and stories spread across 1 trillion worlds, touching hearts and minds that had thought themselves beyond such things. Retired from his position as ambassador after 7,000 years of service, he spent his final centuries studying humanity, trying to understand how such a young and fragile species had accomplished so much. His final work, completed just before his death, was titled simply The Human Paradox. In it he wrote, "Humanity should not exist. By every measure of galactic evolution, they should have destroyed themselves before they ever left their birth world. They are violent and contradictory, brilliant and foolish, capable of great cruelty and greater kindness. They live for barely a century, yet they think in terms of. They are physically weak, yet they fight with a ferocity that terrifies species 10 times their size. They know they will die, yet they act as if they will live forever. This is their secret. This is why they are changing everything. Humanity does not accept limits. When they encounter a wall, they go through it, or over it, or under it, or around it. When they face an impossible problem, they solve it anyway, not because they are smarter than everyone else, but because they refuse to believe it is truly impossible. When they are told something cannot be done, they hear it as a challenge. We thought we were welcoming children into the galactic community. We were wrong. We were welcoming teachers. They have shown us what we forgot long ago, that growth is more important than stability, that hope is more powerful than fear, that the future belongs to those who reach for it rather than those who wait for it to arrive. I have lived for 7,000 years. I have seen wonders beyond description. But the greatest wonder I have ever witnessed is a species that should have died in its cradle, instead reaching for the stars and refusing to stop until it held them in its hands. That is humanity. That is their gift to the universe, and I am grateful beyond words that I lived long enough to see it. The book became the most widely read work in galactic history. It was translated into every language, distributed to every world, taught in every school. It shaped how the galaxy understood humanity for generations to come. But the humans themselves never read it much. They were too busy reaching for the next star, solving the next problem, dreaming the next dream. They did not have time to sit back and admire what they had accomplished. There was always more to do. Because that was who they were. That was who they would always be. Small, fragile, short-lived creatures who looked at the infinite universe and said, "This is ours. We will make it better. We will never stop." And they never did.